salvation, purification for the first time. Secure from the pests of no weapon that any fleet or army on earth, pay them with their own blood. We shall prevail.
From the Great Basin to the Rockies to the four corners of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico, this is KMMU Main Street Media Utah, coming to you live. You can find us on Rumble, YouTube, X, and our website, kmmu.org. Please join our host, Goud Maragani, for the Goud Crowd, the only radio broadcast good enough to be monitored by Utah's State Bureau of Investigation. Take it away, Goud.
Disappeared. Oh, that's weird. Okay. Well, welcome to the Goud Crowd. I am your host, Goud. As always, welcome to the State Bureau of Investigation. They apparently watch this show. This is their news source. So that means that they're getting good quality news. So I guess that's a good thing. Let me start off with a little bit of personal, kind of an interesting personal thing. This week, I actually got a text message from Senator Curtis, totally randomly, but it looks like he is willing to come on the show. So that's actually really exciting. And once I'm able to schedule this, I will post about it. And then if you have questions, you should let me know what those are. And I will make sure that we ask them so that we can find out what one of our senators is doing in DC. And I'll just say, I don't agree with him on everything, but I really do appreciate elected officials that are willing to come on to shows with people with whom they disagree and answer the questions, right? That's always really helpful because it gives us some accountability and sense of where they stand on issues. Let me just do, before we get to, we'll start, a couple of events that are coming up. One is for all of you who have always wanted to be associated with the Salt Lake Tribune, they are actually looking for people to join their editorial board. So I encourage anyone that is listening to go and apply. The deadline is May 1st. I looked at the application and it's actually not that difficult. So it's worth at least throwing your name in the hat. And, every single thing that they write is exactly what you would expect of a left-wing rag. So it would be useful for them to actually get some diverse viewpoints onto their editorial board. When I say diverse viewpoints, I don't mean Becky Edwards, who is a Democrat who pretends to be a Republican. I mean actual conservatives, maybe people from the grassroots that could give them a better sense of how Utahns feel about issues. Right now, everything that they write is so obviously slanted to the left. It's actually just kind of boring. So that's my message to the Trib, but to all of you, get in there and apply. Make it so that they have to hopefully get someone more conservative than Becky Edwards on their editorial board, although that's not really saying that much because, she's essentially a Democrat. Okay. The other thing is I saw this. There is this event coming up being hosted by our Women's Republican group. So let me pull this up for you. There we go. Here we go. So they have the Women's Republican Club of Salt Lake City, which is headed by Carolyn Phippen. They're going to have an event with the Data Republican. So, and it's coming up on Friday, May 16th at 7 p.m. It'll be in Provo, and it's only $11 to get in. So I believe you don't have to be a woman to go. You just have to be a woman to be an actual woman to be a full member. I think we've already covered this before, but if you are a trans woman, they will not allow you to be a full-fledged member of their group. Rightfully so, because you're not actually a woman. But if you are a woman, you can become a full-fledged member. If you're a man, I think they have an associate membership, but you can go to their events. So if you're interested in hearing more from the Data Republican, this should be a good event to go to. Okay, now let's get to the next issue I want to talk about. I am sure that a bunch of you have seen in the news that I had a lawsuit against Equality Utah and Troy Williams for tortiously interfering with my employment when I worked at Lucid Software. On Friday, the judge dismissed that lawsuit under UPEPA, and that's the Uniform Public Expression Protection Act. I'm going to tell you my opinion of what happened here, and kind of a bird's eye view. But this will just be kind of my opinion as a lawyer about, what this decision means for Utahns in general. Let me just first say, I actually have heard from a lot of people who tell me that they're afraid to speak up about issues. And it's really unfortunate because we have a statutory protection in Utah. It's in the Utah Anti-Discrimination Act. And what it says is that your employer cannot discriminate against you because of your expressive activities outside of work. Okay. It's actually, the intent of this law is really good. And it was part of a compromise that was passed in 2015 where the legislature added discrimination protections for gays and transgender people into the code in exchange for a protection for speech or protecting you from being discriminated against due to your speech outside of work in the discrimination statute. So it's actually, theoretically, it's a really great law to have. We're one of the few that have it. So when I hear people tell me I'm afraid to speak up about issues because I'm afraid I'm going to get fired from my job, I've always thought to myself, well, that's a problem, right? We have the statute on the books now, and the reality is there's very few people who actually go and work at companies and then are willing to freely express themselves outside of work because they fear the repercussions of what could happen with their jobs. Now, I'll just give you an example. I know a prominent Republican. He has a Facebook group, right? And the Facebook group has almost 1,000 people in it. I used to be in it, and I don't know why he removed me from it because I never really commented, but whatever. But I remember someone asking him in there why he doesn't make it public. And he specifically said because he was afraid he would get fired from his job. And none of his viewpoints are anything outside of mainstream conservative thought. So, he's against the trans agenda. He doesn't want pornographic books in schools. He doesn't think that boys should be able to play girl sports. These are that's not controversial. Those are actually pretty standard I don't even know if they're conservative. I actually think these are 80-20 issues in our favor. So, and my thoughts initially was, well, like I just said, there is the statutory protection, and the reason why someone like Equality Utah is able to target someone like me is because there's very few people who actually exercise their rights and speak up, which means that these companies then will target the ones who do. Let's see, and then, but I think, after this decision from the court, I have to rethink that, right? Because the response of someone like that is, well, that's fine and dandy that there is this protection, but then what happens if I get fired from my job? And I've personally gone through that, as many of you know, and it's a very difficult process, because when you get targeted, as I was targeted, you then turn around and you try to apply for jobs, but I think it's very difficult to be able to find a job especially in Utah, where a lot of the big companies are kind of all driven by the same, they all believe in the same philosophies. So, in my case, I ended up starting my own practice, but I think I understand better. But here's the thing, I'm single. I'm a single gay man. And so the hurdles that I have in my life are very different than, for example, someone who is married and has kids, right? If that person is the breadwinner and they lose their job, that's a very different situation than someone like me losing my job. Now, don't get me wrong, it's hard all the same, but I can imagine that if you have young children, your thoughts about this are very different, and that risk may not be worth taking for you. Okay. So what you find in Utah is that when you go around and you are involved in controversial or political issues, the people on both sides of this are overwhelmingly women. And typically they're either stay-at-home moms or housewives who are able to get involved because they don't have the risk of being fired by their employer for anything they say that the employer doesn't approve of, right? So I just think about that as I kind of talk about this opinion, because I think this opinion actually confirms the fears of my friends who have come to me and told me that they're afraid to speak up. So basically, what happened, just a little bit of background, because otherwise I don't think this will make sense, but in 2023, Equality Utah, first Troy Williams, and then also one of his board members, they sent emails to, by the way, these are my opinions, but everything I'm talking about, this isn't the public record. So you can go and you can look it up yourself if you want to verify. You can read the decision, you can read any of the filings in the court, and you can come to your own conclusions, which I always encourage people to do because, I'm a conservative. I like people with independent thought. I don't need a bunch of automatons running around. But in 2023, Troy Williams sent emails to the head of HR at Lucid Software, where I worked, and he complained about me. The first email he sent was before this training with this one of his transgender employees that I didn't go to because I would never go to any Equality Utah training, so it wasn't really relevant. But that's what started the whole thing. After the training, he sent another email, and then he also had one of his board members, this woman, Sunny Washington, contact the CEO of Lucid. Sunny used to actually be a Republican delegate as recently as 2022. So kind of, although I don't think she was actually a Republican, she was one of those Democrats that are infiltrating the Republican Party. So anyway, but that's the background. So we filed this lawsuit for tortious interference. In response to it, they filed what's called a UPEPA motion. UPEPA is the Uniform Public Expression Protection Act. Utah just passed this in 2023. It's a law that was developed by the Uniform Law Commission to protect people from what are known as anti-SLAPP suits. And so this is when somebody sues you to silence you because of your exercise of one of your First Amendment rights. The way the statute is written is that it says there's different things you do that are protected by the statute. So in this case, what was at issue is exercising your First Amendment right on an issue of public concern. Okay, and this is where I think this causes a real problem, because the emails that I was just talking about were all secretly sent to high up people at Lucid. They were not made public. Like, nobody in the public knew about it. I only knew about it because my employer told me about the emails. I'm not sure that they were supposed to or not. But what the court decision says is that those private secret emails sent by Troy and his board member to my employer were him expressing his First Amendment rights on issues of public concern. And so there's a couple things here. And I think first, this, to me at least, and in my opinion, this turns UPEPA on its head. UPEPA is really designed to protect the little guy against powerful people when they come and they work to silence you. And they do that by filing lawsuits against you that have no merit, but that get you caught up in the legal system, and costing you a lot of money, making it so that you're not able to speak anymore. And that's not what this was about. This was about, again, one of, I would say, the most powerful organizations in Utah, sending secret emails, secret private emails to my employer about me, with what I believe the purpose was to get me fired from my job. And the reason, just so everyone understands, the reason they did this is because they can't actually win a public debate on the issues that they promote. I was an effective voice against, and I think I still am, an effective voice against the issues that they are constantly promoting. Utahns don't want, in this most recent legislative session, we saw it. They had Utah State University, I think, up in Logan, allowed a boy who thinks he's a girl to live in the women's dorm. And one of the young women that had to share a dorm room with him went and complained. And we have seen before, they then, they made that young woman go move somewhere else. and they let the man stay in the women's dorm. And so this got the legislature jumped into action, and Equality Utah was on the side of the man in the woman's dorm. So my point is, though, they can't actually win these debates against you and me. They never can. And so instead, what they do is they shut us down by trying to, in this case, they just destroy my ability to make a living. Let me see here. Oh, this is okay. We have a comment, but we'll get back to that because it's not relevant to what I'm saying right now, but I appreciate the comment. Okay, so UPEPA is supposed to protect the exercise of freedom of speech on a matter of public concern. And so I think here, this decision is it's kind of dangerous to normal everyday Utahns, because it means, again, in my opinion, that Equality Utah can contact your employer secretly behind the scenes to get you fired if you go and you speak on any issue of public concern. And that should really scare Utahns across the state, that any group is able to do that. The purpose of UPEPA is actually to promote robust public discussions on issues. But I don't know how that happens if we allow organizations to go and target people's employment and destroy their lives if they get involved in the public sphere. And in fact, I think the actual impact of this will be the opposite. The other piece is this. Under the Utah Anti-Discrimination Act, like I was saying earlier, there's a provision that says your employer cannot discriminate against you due to your outside expressive activities. And so what that means from a practical perspective is your employer should not be going into your social media and combing it to see if you've said anything that they don't approve of. They shouldn't be tracking if you go and you testify in the Capitol, they should not be looking at that to see if you said something that's against their view on something. You're supposed to be able to have a private life that is separate. But here, under this decision, a nonprofit could take those same posts, send them to your employer, and then your employer could fire you based on that. And I guess to me, it just seems like, I'm not sure, like, to me, it's under my opinion is that completely undermines the UADA protections. And it puts us all at risk of really being fired if you speak up on issues in this state. I think, we'll have to see where this all goes, but this to me is something that the legislature is probably going to have to address. I don't think the purpose of UPEPA was what happened in my case. My case was not an anti-SLAPP suit. It was a tort based on actions that Troy did and his organization, which was like they contacted my employer. And if you go through and you read the briefings in the case, it was very clear we never made any issue about anything they said about me publicly. I don't think that was never a problem. You can say whatever you want about me publicly. The issue is when you start contacting people's employer and you have a relationship with the employer. So because Equality Utah actually has a business equality leader program that Lucid is a part of. So in order to keep that certification, right, Lucid has to do certain things that Equality Utah asks them to do. So, if one of those things is, hey, your employee is saying things that we don't think is appropriate. Okay, so I would assume Lucid would ask, well, does that mean that you're going to take away our business equality leader program? Because if yes, that seems like you're undermining again the protections of UADA. Anyway, so I think the next, my view is we'll probably have to go to the legislature to get this fixed. And let me kind of show you why I'm not 100% sure. It could work. It could work. I'm not a pessimist on this stuff, but I do think, a lot of you are going to have to get involved. So let me just show you something. This has been, I wanted to show you guys this last time, but I didn't get a chance. So hold on, I'll show you this. It's, I think it's pretty wild. Okay, here we go. And the reason I want to show you this is this will give you a sense of the challenges we face if we, if we do this. So this is Brady Brammer.
Pat themselves on the back. I would love to create a commission called.
I'm never gonna be able to do this right, am I? Hold on. Whoop. So frustrating. Okay, I'm gonna have to figure out maybe a different way to do this because the problem is I'm not supposed. Can you hear him? Okay. All right. Well, let me just say this. So Brady Brammer, who's a senator who's allegedly conservative, talks about how he works with Equality Utah, and he has great respect for Troy Williams. And many times he finds himself in the same room as Troy, and they're both staring at each other, wondering why they're there again. And that's what we're up against. You see, like, Equality Utah is one of the most powerful organizations in the state. A lot of our legislators, even those that we think are conservative, they kowtow to them. So the question for all of you that are listening is, how do we deal with that? What do you do next? Especially if now they can come after your employment. So, okay. Oh, by the way, I totally forgot to say this, but so we're going to have Michael Clara on. He'll be on at 6. I will have phone lines open, so you guys can call in and ask questions if you have them. I think I talked to him last night, and there is some really good stuff that I think a lot of you will find interesting. So feel free to call in if you have questions, okay? And we'll put you in, or comment, and I'll ask them for you. Oh, my, I know, Mr. Producer, I'm not supposed to share the link. That's the problem. So I got to figure out how to do this. We'll come back to that Brady Brammer thing maybe next week. I can clip it. The next thing I wanted to show you is the Tribune. And I'm sort of like, Goud, why are you showing us the Salt Lake Tribune? This is a garbage newspaper, which I concur with. But Mr. Producer, when Tracy calls in, or if anyone calls in, just let me know. They did an article about the lawsuit, and there was a part of this I thought was kind of interesting. Okay, let's see here. I'm just sorry. I'm trying to find what I was going to talk about. Oh, okay. That's what I want to tell you about. So if you read this article, I actually think that if you are conservative, I come off looking pretty cool in this article, because they say things like, while a candidate and as the head of the Utah Gay Straight Coalition, the now dissolved chapter of Log Cabin Republicans, Maragani, who is gay, has often made anti-transgender remarks and taken jabs at Equality Utah from the social media accounts of those organizations. Now, the answer to that is, okay, then you should just respond. But instead of doing that, because again, they can't actually win a debate. That's also why if you go to the social media of Troy, he blocks a lot of people. He has to control narratives because he can't actually win debates. That's the difference between someone like Troy and someone like me, and actually most conservatives. They also said that I have spent time at the Capitol pushing for the passage of laws restricting transgender people's access to gender-affirming health care and bathrooms that align with their gender identity, and in the process has spread misinformation about the transgender community. I thought that was an interesting claim, that last part about spreading misinformation, because I can't think of any misinformation I have spread about the transgender community. In fact, I think it's actually the advocates on the other side who spread all of the misinformation about the transgender community. For example, when they pretend that a man is a woman, that is misinformation. When they tell you that you can change your sex, or they go and they tell your children they can change their sex, that is misinformation. So it is not me spreading misinformation. It is the people promoting the agenda who have spread the misinformation. Now, there was another piece in here that I thought was kind of interesting. Maybe that was my main point. Let me see my notes here, sorry. Oh, they said that okay, this is the other thing. They keep saying this. Let's see, here. For tonight. And seeking the statement. They keep saying that I sought the endorsement of Equality Utah when I ran for county clerk, right? And I've said this before, but I just want to make this very clear to anybody who is listening. When I sought their endorsement, like I didn't enthusiastically support them, seek their endorsement, whatever that means. I asked for their endorsement, but I did it on my terms. I actually said, you should support, you should endorse me because I am gay, a veteran, a minority, a really good lawyer, and those are the reasons why you should endorse me for county clerk. I did not fill out their paperwork. They request you to, they'll ask you a bunch of questions and things like, do you support men using women's bathrooms? Then you have to mark whether you support it or not. I never did any of that. I just thought, hey, look, you are an organization that allegedly tries to promote the LGBTQIA plus FU community or whatever. And I am a member of it, right? I'm the G. I'm actually the normal part, the LGB, I'm the G. As I said before, we need to cut that TQ plus out of it. But I thought, if you're really an organization that is about promoting gays, then I would think that when a gay person runs for office, you would want to endorse them, even if you don't agree on all the issues. And the reason you want to endorse them is because I would think part of your whole goal is to get more gays into office so that we're visible, we're out there, people see us as just normal people like everybody else. But that's not what that organization is about. They are more about promoting the trans agenda than promoting, the LGBT part. Anyway, so that's not really seeking their endorsement. I mean, Amy Winder Newton actually got their endorsement. So she filled out their paperwork, which she will not let you see. She did an interview with them, which she won't show you the video of, because I think she basically probably is the case, as many of us already know without having to see it, that she is a liberal white woman. Right? Like, I mean, that's the reality of it. Okay. Let's see here. We've got one comment from Normie Teacher. What's the deal with, and then in parentheses, Seinfeld voice, sentencing criminal aliens to 364 days? What's that move? Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, that's to prevent deportation. So, like if you're sentenced for 365 days or more, you become eligible for deportation for both legal and illegal aliens. And, it's my view that if you commit a crime, like, get out of here. I don't care if you're legal or illegal. I'm not really sure why we need criminal legal immigrants here. Get out, like, bye-bye, go away. You had your chance. But for some reason, a lot of people think that once you immigrate to the US, we're required to keep you forever, no matter what you do. And I think we should actually have a much stricter policy that, if you're not actually improving our country, and by definition, you are not improving our country if you commit crimes, we should get rid of you. And we should not let you become a citizen either. But that probably makes me I'm more of an immigration restrictionist, I think, than a lot of people in Utah. Okay, let's see. Oh, there I am. Hello.
I clicked the wrong button, Goud. Sorry. I have Tracy.
Okay, great. You can put her through.
Tracy, say hello to Goud.
Hi, Goud. How are you?
Hey, how are you, Tracy?
Good. I wanted to call in and just talk about the most recent thing about, I don't know if you saw, Rob Axon is a lobbyist, and he's the one that's running for the Utah Republican Party chair against Phil Lyman. And I kind of wanted to call in and get your thoughts about having a lobbyist be a chair. And to me, that is a conflict of interest, because you're always going to side with the side that's going to pay you. You're not going to really be able to call anybody out if they are doing any corruption, and that's part of our platform. What are your thoughts about it?
Oh, I'm just going to ask, I don't know the answer to this. Is he a registered lobbyist with the state?
Yes, he said he had to register this time.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Is that a new development?
It is. It came out at a debate that they had. Davis County conservatives put it on, and it came out then that he had to now register as a lobbyist, and it was, I guess, with I think he said energy and some nonprofits. But it sparked a debate in one of these Facebook groups, and some people, I don't think they understand the conflict of interest that brings into your party, and that you need a separation of powers for a reason. And somebody that makes their living at pushing policy, that how can you be neutral in any kind of thing? Like, you would want this certain legislature all the time because they're the ones that keep pushing your policy, and then you get bonuses from your work because you're a great lobbyist. It seems unethical to me.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said, though, for energy and nonprofits?
Yeah, there was I'd have to go back and look with it. Yeah. There's a video out there. It's on Davis County conservatives, but it was all over the place. I didn't understand. It wasn't just super focused on some energy stuff. It was on other, even schoolings, and you'll have to go back and look at it. But to me, It doesn't matter what the topic is, because no matter what, you're always going to want your favorite legislature that will push your policy. And being in a position of power like that as a party chair, I don't know how ethically that is even comprehensible. Why you would even think that's okay?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Maybe the question for delegates voting is what do you think the purpose of the party is? If you want it, because if you're a lobbyist, I think you're going to have to side more with people that are, for one thing, already in power and establishment figures in order to get the policies that your clients want enacted into law. So you're less likely to challenge the status quo. And I don't know, I don't know where you are on this, but for me, Rob's been chair for the past couple of years. I think he's a nice guy. He's a very nice guy. But I think we could use a shakeup, because the reality is, on the whole signature issue with the nomination petitions, I just didn't think that they did enough to try to get access to those petitions and see what the signatures on them look like. So, Governor Cox and Lieutenant Governor Henderson got access to the GOP primary ballot, and our party has never seen the signatures that they used to get onto that ballot. So we have no idea. Well, I think we have an idea of whether they got enough. I think the answer seems to be no, but I'm just saying, the party should have been the ones that could get in there and actually verify what happened.
Right. And I'm 100% with you. They didn't do enough. It's left. SB 54 has left us with elections full of corruption. And if you have a party chair that now was a lobbyist who never pushed back on them anyways, because he didn't want to not become their friends, it was to me, we should have been asserting, no, that's not how we nominate our nominees. You were wrong, state official. Instead, it's we cower down and do as we're told. And now we're going to have a lobbyist, and I think his wife's a lobbyist too, but I'm not sure. But now we're going to have a lobbyist. He's just going to cower down again, and we're just going to keep having election fraud, and it's going to be okay. What is his purpose?
Yeah. I see your point for sure. I think that issue, that's, I'll say, scandal with the signature, with the nomination petitions and the signatures with Governor Cox. That kind of shows you the problem with having a lobbyist as a chair. I did not know that he was a lobbyist before. I didn't know. Actually, I don't even know. I'm sure he told me what he did. I can't remember what it was, but it's time. But having said that, I'm not a state delegate. But if I was one, I would vote for Phil for the chair position. I think we need a change after what happened in that. Again, like I said, with those petitions, regardless of what you think of whether there was fraud, the party should be involved in seeing all of the signatures and making sure that you are actually collecting the minimum number of signatures required to get onto our primary ballot. This is not, the state doesn't own it is the party's primary ballot, and we should be protecting it from what happened this election. Had they done that, maybe Cox wouldn't have been on the primary ballot because, like I said, I don't think he collected the number of signatures he needed to get on there, and we would have had a better outcome.
Well, right, and so we have a candidate that was never nominated, never qualified for a ballot, because Michael Clara even reported as one of them, and I don't know if these are Cox's signatures, because they're totally avoiding applying those 11 individuals that got indicted for signature fraud. They don't apply it. I don't think they're even saying that's part of Cox's books. They won't even look at him, so they're protecting him. And one guy, he submitted like 2,500 signatures, and only, I think it's around 80 of them were even like real signatures that weren't fraud. So you have these nominees, they didn't even qualify for the ballot, and we're going to allow this just to continue as a party.
Yeah. And this happens, by the way, all across the country. Everywhere that you have signature gathering, I looked into this when this was going on. Constant problems with forgeries, with fraud. It's not a good system. And I mean, frankly, like, I agree with people who think SB 54 needs to be repealed. But in the meantime, because unfortunately, everybody that we want to get out of office, they use SB 54 to stay in office. So like, that's part of the problem. But so they're not going to vote against it. But I do wonder if, after seeing what happened this time, we as the grassroots and as everyday people, I think, have a much better ability to challenge it the next time when they try to pull a stunt like that. And then just for everyone listening, I'll have Michael Clara on at 6, and he's going to talk about exactly what you just talked about. That's one of the issues, is how the reason, or his theory as to why they are not charging the signature gatherers for forgeries related to Governor Cox's signature petitions. It's if you're listening, you want to listen, it's really good stuff. I'm not going to tell you the answer.
I'll check it out. I'll keep listening.
You have anything else for us? I think that's good to think about for people.
No, that's all I wanted to call in, and I'll listen in at 6 to hear Michael Clara.
All right, cool. Thanks for calling in. Okay, so let's see what else we got here. I was just talking about, that's a good call. Like, if you're a state delegate and you're trying to figure out who to vote for, I'm a full believer in you should make the decisions that you think are best. But I really think one of the issues that what Tracy just brought up is an important one. That is, I didn't realize that Rob is a lobbyist, although it sounds like that was a recent development that he had to become a registered lobbyist, and that does change things for sure. It's not saying he's not a nice guy, because I think some of you guys get concerned about that. I'm not saying he's not a nice guy. I'm not saying he's not a good husband, and I'm not saying he's a bad father. I just think we need a different type of leadership for the party. The party should be a voice for the grassroots. It should be the bully pulpit for the policies and the issues that the grassroots want to see implemented all across the state. That is what a state party chair should be able to do with it. We don't have that going on here because too many times the state party chair is too closely associated with the governor and his henchmen. And so people aren't willing to push back. They're not willing to, I think, challenge them when there's obvious problems on what they're doing. Oh, I have Mr. Mr. Producer says another conflict of interest. Rob shouldn't even be considering a GOP office if he's a lobbyist. Well, true. I mean, I think we should be clear, paid lobbyist. I think while the grassroots is all trying to lobby for stuff, but when you do it on your own dime, it's a very different thing. You're doing it for passion, to make good change. When you do it because you're getting paid, it just feels different. Okay, so another issue that I thought was kind of interesting is abusive 501c3s. And in 2023, I filed a couple of complaints against the Salt Lake Tribune for being an abusive 501c3. They are a partisan newspaper. And a little background. I can't remember the year, but they were granted nonprofit status by the IRS. I think this may have actually happened during President Trump's first term. So the problem is they are clearly a left-wing hack newspaper. And I don't think that we should have to subsidize their business operations as taxpayers, right? The 501c3 organization is supposed to be nonpartisan, and it is very clear that the Tribune is just essentially an arm of the local Democratic Party. And so I had filed these complaints, but I filed them when Biden was president. And so what I'm thinking about doing is refiling them now that we have President Trump, because I think President Trump actually understands the need to completely and utterly destroy the left-wing apparatus that we have in really across the country and in every state. So that's your 501c3s and your nonprofits, because there's other types of nonprofits. These are all, and you can see right now they were just talking about Act Blue and the problems with that. So you need to actually deal with that, because the left is able to use Act Blue as a way to funnel foreign money into American elections by not having proper protections in place, and being able to because they're not doing the proper verification of the people that are donating, and so they're able to kind of launder money into elections. That's why you see these huge numbers for fundraising for them. I think part of it too, though, is that rich people, for whatever reason, tend to be very leftist. It's very strange. And that's why, I'll be honest with you, I've been hearing kind of these rumors that as part of this big tax bill that the Congress is going to do, they may raise the top tax rate. Or I heard President Trump is supporting adding a bracket at people who make $1 million or more a year, and then increasing their rate, I think, to 40%. Normally, I'm a taxes should be as close to zero as possible guy. Right. So, we should be driving. I think in the state of Utah, our goal should be to eliminate the income tax. It should be to cap property taxes at whatever they are when you buy your house, and eventually to eliminate them as well. My goal is we should be eliminating all taxation, because it is all theft. And it actually means you have to work typically. I think total taxes for the average American is about 50% of your income. They'll give you these lower numbers. That's not accurate. Especially when you start taking into account federal income tax, state income tax, property taxes, your vehicle registration fee, gas taxes, sales taxes, use taxes, fees. These people are constantly charging us for stuff. And I think we pay about half of our income to taxes in some form. And that means that you have to work twice as much to be able to provide for your family. If we could eliminate taxes, income taxes, and really all other taxes, we could work less, and we would have a much more productive society. You'd be able to keep more of your money. You could increase your wealth. It would be wonderful. But I've heard rumors that in order to make the numbers work for their big, beautiful bill, they may have to increase rates on this top bracket, right? So it's like people making $1 million or more. And I'll be honest with you, from a political perspective, most of those people vote for Democrats. And so on some level, even though philosophically I'm opposed to it, practically I'm kind of like, whatever, I don't care. If you want to go vote for Democrats, that means that you wanted higher taxes. So let's increase your taxes and you can pay them. Why should I? I'd rather have more tax cuts for the everyday working man and woman, because they're the ones that actually need the tax cuts. They need their taxes eliminated. They need to be more appreciated in our country, versus rich people. I just could not care. I could not care less. That's what I should say. So, but my point for all of that was, with the Salt Lake Tribune, I'm thinking about refiling my complaints now that we have President Trump in office, because what we can do is take advantage of the fact that he has now put in place an administration that supports his vision for the country. And part of that is to crack down on abusive 501c3s. I saw somewhere, I think it's in DC, where they're actually going to criminally prosecute a 501c3. And I think that'd be great, because there's no private right of action. So we have to depend on the government to do this. And I think there are other 501c3s and nonprofits in Utah that are actually arms of the Democrat Party. And so we can go through and start filing complaints against these. And part of what I'm thinking is maybe there'd be some value in putting these out there and letting citizens sign on to them. So maybe we send over a complaint that a few hundred people have signed. It might get more, that might give it more weight with the IRS and increase the likelihood that we can actually get the 501 or the nonprofit status stripped from the organization. So that's kind of one of my little goals. Then I had an update from last week. We talked about Lanny Chapman, or more specifically, that Representative Lisenby had put out a message saying that they had confirmation that, here, hold on, I'll give you the exact language. I don't want to misquote it. So according to Representative Lisenby, some clerks have been approving illegal immigrant voter registrations. Now, that's a quotation from her. Now, Representative Lisenby has not yet disclosed which clerk's offices she was referring to. I will say that I'm a little bit unclear about how anybody knows the immigration status of any registrant, because like I've said before, the way that they check it, I don't actually think our clerks have a method to verify citizenship. So I'm a little bit unclear on this, but I sent an email to Lanny Chapman asking her if her office has a picture. I'll actually show it to you. I don't really care. Although is there anything in here that's private? Hold on, let me figure out a way to do this so you can't see everything. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'll share this with you so you can see the email, and then you can make your own judgments. So I emailed her, asked her if her office has approved any registration forms for legal or illegal aliens. I sent this last Thursday. And then if your answer is no, please provide details on how your office verifies that an individual who submits a voter registration form is a U.S. citizen before approving their registration and inputting their information into the VISTA system. I am planning to talk about this on my radio show on Monday. That's what we're doing right now. And we'll be live from 5 to 7 p.m. It would be great to have a response from you before my show. If you are willing, you are welcome to call in to talk about what sorts of controls your office has put in place to ensure that only U.S. citizens are on the voter rolls in Salt Lake County. I followed up with her today. I also gave her the number to the show. She hasn't responded. So, I'll continue to follow up to try to get an answer. What I am guessing will happen is that she's probably going to run to the Salt Lake Tribune to give a comment instead of making a comment to me. And the reason for that is because the Tribune journalists don't actually understand how the election system works. And so she can bamboozle them with her, she'll say a bunch of stuff and they'll fall for it. And then she'll say, and I'm a woman, I'm a liberal white woman clerk. You can't criticize me. And so they'll write a piece probably saying that I'm the bad person for criticizing her. But we need an answer on this. She's up for re-election in 2026. And I would say if she has approved any voter registration forms for legal or illegal aliens, so that would be non-citizens, that she should not be reelected into office. It will also show that the Soros funding of her campaign was effective. Okay, that's exactly why Soros gave her money. Okay, so we've got 3 minutes. We are going to have Michael Clara on soon. Let me just say, before he comes on, if anybody that is listening wants to ask questions, you can put the questions in the comments. Those do scroll for me to see. Or you can call in. We'll keep the phone lines open the entire time because I think it's a great opportunity for you guys to ask questions of him and what he has found, right? Because part of the reason I wanted to bring him on is because he's done a whole series of videos talking about his findings, but it really hasn't been covered in the mainstream media in any sort of in-depth analysis or anything. And I feel like there's really nobody that understands what he has found better than he has. So that'll be great to do. Okay, so now I said that, let's see what else I got in my list of things I want to talk about. Let's see. I will say this, and this is more for probably a future show, but I wanted to talk about the idea that I think we treat men and women differently in Utah when it comes to your sexual harassment complaints. And he said post to them to ask questions. I don't know how do I do that, Mr. Producer? Should I just do it in this comment thing here? Okay, I guess that's all right. Okay, I'm going to post a question. If you have questions.
Yeah, you can post it on your Facebook, on your wherever you like, and then if somebody responds, you'll see them because you got a bunch of people watching.
Okay. If you have questions for Michael Clara, post them.
And it looks like Michael Clara is here.
Oh, okay, you can put him in.
Here he comes. I'm out. He's in.
Good. That looks like it went to YouTube. Hey, Michael, how are you doing? Okay, we are live. I like you have what's going on behind you?
Oh, that's my that's all signature verification stuff, actually.
Wow, that looks amazing. I think, is this what Brian Schott had made fun of you about before?
I'm waiting for the time I copied that where I can say who's laughing now. But I think like directly behind me is a timeline that I created. That's right behind my head. And then over to, I don't know what direction it would be, but the other one that's not impeded is actually the Cox, the submission forms that where they had submitted 10 separate times of signatures. And so those are the submission forms. And then those index cards on the bottom are just the 11 that were charged. And I just kind of charted them out. I'm more of a visual learner. So I think nowadays, your generation could just do this all electronically, but I got to see it all, visually for it to make sense for me.
Very cool. Okay. Can you start? Let's start by talk about your background and how you got involved in investigating the signatures that were gathered by Governor Cox and other statewide candidates.
Well, my background, I retired from law enforcement, and was doing emergency management for about 20 years with Utah Transit Authority, and then one of the things for me is I was a mayor in Maynard, Texas, when I was I think in my early 30s, and then recently, about 10 years ago, I was on the school board here in Salt Lake City. So it's just just for me, the intersection of law enforcement and being in an elected office, I think I have a skill set that's kind of unique. and I've applied that to different things in terms of public service here recently. And so I got involved in this. Just in fact, I was looking at an article. It was by Brian, Schultz, and it was in July, and it's titled "I'm Not a Conspiracy Theorist: Phil Lyman's Long Shot Strategy to Overturn Governor Cox's GOP Primary Win." And in that, he actually explains how I got involved, and he points out, which is accurate, what he said about me is that I was just helping with the grammar request. I attended the April this time last year was at the GOP convention, and a mutual friend introduced me to a delegate from down south that wanted help with the grammar request because they were trying to get the Ibsen list and compare it to Norton, who was on the State Board of Education, and they were denied. And I said that you can't be denied. And so I think when I gave that person instructions on how to do it, they didn't follow it. So I just got frustrated. So you know what? I'll just file my own grammar request. And I was able to get the Norton list, and then the Ibsen list. The Washington County said, we can't give it to you because there's a criminal investigation going on. And so I thought I was done. And I like to point out, to people, I'm an innocent bystander in this. I thought I was done. I did my part. I helped them with the grammar request. And then Natalie Clausen, who was a candidate for lieutenant governor, contacted me, I think, in early June and just said, hey, we think that there might be a connection here. And I remember I was driving back from Idaho and just thought, this lady's crazy because she thinks that, that this thing might have some, and she's explaining to me why they believe that the Cox signature, that Cox didn't get the right amount of signatures. And I just really thought that, I'm a moderate Republican, by the way. I was, but and I did vote for Phil as a state delegate because I wasn't going to vote for the guy that collected signatures. But at the time I had no idea the signature process. But that's how I got involved is Natalie Clausen called me out of the blue, and I thought she was a nice lady, a little bit crazy, thinking that Cox didn't get enough signatures. So I helped her with the grammar requests, and then I fell in the rabbit hole.
Okay. Talk a little bit about the video series that you've done. I think so that people who haven't seen it yet, maybe that's a good reference point if they want to dive deeper into some of the issues that you highlighted.
Okay. So I did the first video out of frustration, had no idea that I would, make a series of it. But what happened was when in this process, because I think I got on social media and people were aware that I was looking into this. What happened was on the Ibsen list, I was ready to drop it because, we were done with it. But then I did file an appeal in order to help Natalie Clausen and Phil Lyman in their pursuit because what their theory was at the time is that if we get the Ibsen list, because Ibsen and Cox use the same company, that if you get the Ibsen list, their theory was you're going to compare the Ibsen list to the Cox list, and you're going to find that there were Ibsen list signatures that were rejected, and those same signatures were approved on the Cox list.
Yes.
Was their theory. So I moved forward, with that, and then at one point, this is like in July of last year, some people contacted me and said, "Hey, we live in Vineyard, and we got contacted by an investigator from the Attorney General's office, and our signatures are forged on a petition for Governor Cox." She showed it to us, and she gave us a business card, and here's the case number. So it was Jordan, who was an investigator with the Attorney General's office, and it had a case number on it. I said, I'm going to file a grammar request for this investigation. And because this is pretty, again, remember this was in July where all you have is Phil Lyman questioning publicly that Cox got enough signatures, and he's kind of being mocked for even bringing it up. And then you have like the Davis County clerk at the time, McKenzie, saying, absolutely that's not true. There's integrity to this process. So I do this grammar request. It's not, nobody knows publicly at the time. And what I anticipated, I was going to get a letter back just saying, we're not giving it to you because there's an investigation going on. And my intent was just to hand the letter to Natalie Clausen and say, hey, maybe your campaign can use this because that's significant that there is an investigation going on into the Cox signature list. And that kind of, supports your theory that, that you think something's going on. That's what I thought was going to happen. And at this point, I'm believing more what Natalie Clausen and Phil Lyman are saying, that there might be a problem here. Well, I get this response back from the Attorney General's office saying, we don't have any records responsive to your request. And it's like, how do they not have any records? They have to. Where do they think this case number comes from? So I appeal it. And in my appeal, I'm very specific now, saying I have this case number. And this case number, is related, according to the witnesses that I've talked to. You guys are investigating the Cox signature list. And then Daniel Burton with the Attorney General's office denies my appeal and says, no, we don't have any records. I've researched it myself. So now I appeal it to the State Records Committee, and I'm familiar with the process with the State Records Committee. In fact, last year, I was only second to Adam Herberts with Channel 13 and the amount of appeals that were filed with the State Records Committee. My point is, I'm no novice on how they operate. And so I filed an appeal with the State Records Committee, and they don't even schedule it. The executive secretary says, we're not even going to schedule this because you don't have any evidence that the Attorney General's office has the records you're seeking. They told you they don't have it. So as the executive secretary, she has the authority to do that in conjunction with the chair. And at the time, I said, well, you don't even have a chair. So how are you rejecting this? And I sent her an email asking questions. She doesn't even respond. So I kind of blew a fuse on it because I said, there really is a cover-up going on. And this is a quote unquote, now I'm a conspiracy theorist. And I was upset about that. So I made the first video, and I think I titled it the Cox signature list, the Cox signature list cover up. And that was the first video I made. I didn't have any intention of making a series, but I made the video to expose the fact that the State Records Committee won't even schedule an appeal. And I figured, well, because it has to do with Cox. Somebody got to them, and this is crazy. So that's how I started the series.
Okay. Let me so one thing is I was looking at your X account, and you kind of just touched on this, but you highlighted that signature gatherers are not being charged for forgeries associated with Governor Cox's signature petitions. Can you talk about that? I can share that X post if that's helpful.
Right.
Here. I guess talk to the audience about why they're not being charged with forgeries related to the Governor Cox nomination petition.
So first of all, what I noticed is when the indictments came out, a couple of the news agencies, did a pretty good job at detailing them, but I just went to the courthouse here in Salt Lake and looked them up and printed them. And as I'm reading them, I'm realizing none of these people are being charged for signatures, fraudulent signatures on the Cox list, which I thought was interesting. Mm-hmm. There may be one, Benson Angulau may be the only one that is, but out of the, let's see, I think you had 11, and 4 of them are working for Gathering Inc., which is the company that Cox had, and also the company that Ibsen had. And so they're not charging them with any of the fraudulent signatures that have to do with Cox. So my theory is that if they were to do that, that a defense attorney would have access and would need to have access to the evidence through discovery, and they would have to disclose. They would end up, number one, with a chain of custody issue because of the way they shuffled these signature packets for Cox back and forth between, and I point that out in some of these. I think I have 13 updates to the original video series. I just did number 13, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And in those, I point out that, and I got this information initially, we all did in October from the legislative auditor, that packets were, that the, let me say it this way, that the county clerk, Davis County clerk, that they saw packets, signature packets, that they flagged and removed from the verification process, which in my opinion is illegal, because every packet that you receive, you're to document all those signatures. And what they should have done is documented the signatures in those packets and just document them as not matching. That's not difficult to do. There was no reason not to do that, but they chose not to do that, and instead they removed packets completely from the process. And according to the Auditor General, the Legislative Auditor General in October, then they gave those to the Lieutenant Governor, and the Lieutenant Governor's office reviewed them and made the determination if they were going to send them to the Attorney General or not. And so they, so those packets were, that's why I believe that they didn't charge anybody with fraudulent signatures in the Cox signature packets, because they're going to run into a chain of custody problem, and they would have to disclose in more detail what the Auditor General from the Legislative Auditor General revealed.
Yeah, I guess one of my questions here, and maybe this is clarification, is typically my understanding is that when the signature gatherers go to gather signatures, that they will have nomination petitions for more than one candidate at a time. And so, for example, like I think earlier you were talking about the Ibsen petition, the nomination petition. It's my understanding is that those gatherers would have both Ibsen's petitions and any other clients like the gathering had, so that when they go to a home or they go to an individual, that they actually ask the person to sign multiple petitions. Is that correct? Okay. And then here, I guess you think, okay, so here with these, the risk is, if the defense, based on what I'm hearing you say, the risk is that the defense attorneys could go, and if the client is charged, the defense attorneys could ask for exculpatory evidence, or actually all evidence based on their being charged, which would have included those Governor Cox petitions, and caused, you said, partly a chain of custody issue. Like, I guess I'm a little bit unclear what the chain of custody issue
Well,
is.
for example, the X post that you're showing right now, so that's tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
The 29th. Yeah. So what I'm just showing there on this X post is ask, and I think I reached out to some people in Washington County. I wanted to go, but I just can't because I got too much going on here in Salt Lake. But there's these are people that are signature gatherers for Cox, but they're only being charged for fraudulent signatures that they did for on the Ibsen list, and that's why they're being charged. Just and because of the case number and the way things are described in the indictment, I know that these are just have to do with the Ibsen list, because in their indictments, these are for signature packets that were specifically turned in to the Washington County clerk, because Ibsen only was in the Washington County area, so his signatures were not verified by Davis County because he was not a multi-county or statewide county candidate. So these are very specific to just Ibsen, even though we never see his name on it. I know that that these are just for the Ibsen list that they're being charged with. So what I'm saying about a chain of custody issue for a defense attorney would be that the fact that if I'm a suspect in fraudulent signatures and I turned in signature packets to my employer, Gathering Inc., Gathering Inc. turns them in to the Davis County clerk, and they record and document all those, and then they end up with the attorney general, then there's not a chain of custody issue. However, in this case, what happens is if I turned in fraudulent signatures and the Davis County clerk actually sends them to the lieutenant governor, who is a candidate in this race, and the Davis County clerk never even recorded the fraudulent signatures that I turned in, but all of a sudden my signature packets ends up with the candidate, and then the candidate sends them to the attorney general, and you're going to accuse me now of some things that now we got some problems with evidence and chain of custody, because who's to say the candidate didn't put those on there, and then now you're trying to lay it all on me.
Okay. How do you know that these, or I should say, do you know that these signature gatherers also collected signatures for Governor Cox?
That's a good question. I know that because their names are on his signature list. So we did get a signature list for Cox, and it shows, like, for example, it shows 911 packets were processed by the Davis County clerk. And then if you go back to, like that in the beginning, the whiteboard that I have up, the reason I plotted on a whiteboard the 10 submissions that Cox did, and I got those through grammar requests after like 6 months of going back and forth with the idiots at the lieutenant governor's office. He actually submitted, according to, if they gave me everything, 935 packets, signature packets were turned in. And so I know some are missing, because later on I get, I know that 17 packets were used for his quote unquote spare signatures. So like these two people that are, let's see, who's that, Wild and Drake, they definitely gathered signatures for Cox, and they're on the Cox list.
Okay. That I did not, that's a little crazy. So you said earlier that the one exception about signature gatherers being charged for forgeries on Governor Cox's list is Benson Agaloo.
Benson
Angelau. I guess tell us more about that case and what's different.
So I like the order that you asked this question, was really important, because Angelau is not on the Cox list at all. So anybody who gets when I said that Cox had 911 packets, none of the Angelau is not one of the signature gatherers for Governor Cox. So, but he's being charged. The other interesting thing that I point out in this latest update, number 13 in the video, is that when you have 11 charged, the ones that are not Gathering Inc. employees, they're very specific in their indictments about what they're charging them with. We know how many signatures they turned in. We know how many are fraudulent. We know how many were valid. But when they do the indictments on the Gathering Inc. employees, we don't get any detail of that at all. Other than the only exception is we get a detail on Benson Angelau. We get everything. We know how many signatures he turned in, 2,000 and something. We know that 84 of them are valid signatures. And so we get this detail with him. But again, his name never shows up on the Cox list. Now, the next question would be, well, how do you know he had anything to do with Cox? Is because when he went to his hearing last week, and I pulled it up on the court docket, the case number that's on the business card from the people in Vineyard is the case number on his court docket. So the Attorney
Whoa.
General's case number that was on that business card, where they continually, even as late as last week, the AG denies that they're doing an investigation on the Cox list. That case number is on Angulau's court docket as the law enforcement case number. So, and remember I said earlier, and it may involve multiple candidates, but I do know for a fact that that is the Cox signature list, because the people that I talked to, for example, the people that I talked to, their initials actually show up on his indictment anyways as witnesses. They're not on the Cox list. So the Davis County clerk removed their names from the Cox list, removed any signatures that Angulau turned in for Governor Cox. He's not even on the Governor Cox list.
Okay. That's really interesting. So based on what you've seen so far, do you have an opinion about whether every single signature gatherer who has committed forgery has actually been charged or will be charged? And I have this feeling that there's not really an incentive to go through and charge every single person involved with a criminal charge, because it actually it could raise even bigger problems with the gathering process, and maybe even raise that other candidates also didn't meet the thresholds. But I don't know if you've seen anything in what you've been able to gather so far.
Yeah, I mean, for example, these, we know they didn't get charged with all the fraudulent signatures, that we're aware of, especially on the Cox list. Now again, Angulau gets charged, I believe, with fraudulent signatures on the Cox list, and they've removed his name with any connection. And I still, if his attorney or him or Angulau watch this, they should raise a red flag on chain of custody issue with his packets anyways, because that's up to them. But there's this, and I hesitate to bring this up, but you asked, there's actually a third audit that didn't get any attention whatsoever. And the only reason we even know that it exists is that earlier, like around March, I think it was Heidi Hatch on KUTV does an X post about, she quotes Tina Cannon, who is a state auditor that was newly elected in November and took office in January. Tina Cannon brings up this audit that she was involved in, that her office was involved in. And she says that there were outside CPA firms, 2 of them, I believe, that were hired, and that they went through all the signatures in the her statement actually was pretty brief. And then I did a grammar request for the audit and got a copy of a letter that John Dougal sent on December 27th to the lieutenant governor. And I don't have it in front of me, but basically what he says is that these auditors, that they looked at every signature with the exception of the signature packets that were in the possession of prosecutors. So any of these 11 that are charged, and Angulau's packets weren't there, any of these people that are charged, their packets were probably all with the prosecutor or the attorney general. But they end up finding, they said like over 1,000 fraudulent signatures. And the way I'm reading it, those fraudulent signatures have nothing to do with the 11 that were already charged. So, and the way they did it looks like a 3-prong investigation, that they just looked at signature packets without looking at Vista, which is the statewide. I think you and Tracy talked about it earlier when you were talking about the illegal people that weren't that are registered, and you mentioned the Vista system. So the Vista system is the statewide data system where all signatures should be entered into anyways. And in this case, they're saying that they looked at packets and could just look at the page and tell that the signatures were forged, because they were all written by the same person. And then they could look at lines and tell that in certain pages that they were forged because it was all by the same person. So they never even looked at the Vista system in that process. And then the third review, they went and looked at the Vista system. I think they're saying there could possibly be up to 10,000 signatures that don't match in the Vista system. And then they do a footnote saying that doesn't mean that they're fraudulent, just means that they don't match. And so I don't know what the purpose of that audit was. It's ridiculous. And then at the time, Rick Cantrell with Tina's office was talking to me, and I called him a couple times, never heard back from him. And I just heard last week he's no longer with her office. So he was only there. Rick Cantrell is the former chief of staff for Sean Reyes. And then he when Reyes left, I guess, in December, Rick Cantrell got a job with Tina Cannon in the state auditor's office, and he was like a operations director or something. It seems to me he was like a chief of staff, but didn't have that title. It was operate, and he did coordinate. I met with the auditors about their audit, and got some answers back in February, and so he was a good coordinator on that. But now he's gone, so I don't know what that's about.
Okay, wow. So I think one of your conclusions has been that Governor Cox did not meet the signature threshold.
Well, it's not my conclusion. Actually, so the conclusion happens in September 3rd, okay, when John Dougal releases his audit, and he says explicitly that statistically speaking, he doesn't meet the threshold, but that's okay because I think he says that he misses that statistically speaking, what they looked at, that he misses the threshold by 320 signatures, but that's okay because they go look at his spare signatures, which were 592 according to Ryan Calley with the Lieutenant Governor's office. And out of that, John Dougal claimed at the time that 391 of those were valid. Therefore, he had enough to backfill his shortfall, according to John Dougal. That was blown out of the water the following month on October 15th when the legislative auditor released their audit and said, not only was he short, they think he was short like up to 1,000 signatures, and that they only located 492 signatures that were spares. But they didn't look to see if they were valid or not. And then because he didn't have enough for the short to backfill the shortfall anyways, according to the Auditor General, the Legislative Auditor General. So I just want to clarify, that's not my conclusion. That came from those two audits. That number one, there's no question that he was short, and the sampling that the state auditor did in September, the legislative auditor the following month did a sampling that was double. I think maybe they did over 1,000. Looked over, yeah. So it was probably three times more of the signatures they looked at, because I think John Dougal only looked at something under 400 sampled and then extrapolated that that what he was short, and so let me just say this, that when in July when Natalie Clausen and Phil Lyman wanted to get a hold of the Ibsen list, my theory was at the time that we're going to find 30 signatures that Cox is short. And, that's in July. We never got the Ibsen list. Even to this day, we haven't gotten it. But Cox is short. And that's not Clara or Phil Lyman saying it. It confirms what Phil Lyman's suspicion was and Natalie Clausen's suspicions were. And these are from two audits that he definitely was short. And then, the spare signatures is another whole story. They don't even exist, but that would be probably another segment for you.
Well, okay, hold on. So is that is the spare signatures, does that relate to the cover and the verification sheets that you got for the signature packets?
Well, yeah, that was so initially what happened was when they basically what I was doing is anything that they stated, I just chased it down with grammar requests. Said, okay, if you're telling us this, I already know that you're lying about things. Let's see to what degree you are lying about things. So if Dougal says that there were 391 spare signatures that are valid, I want to see them. So let me first. So when I first did a grammar request, said, well, give me a list of these. I find the when I do it to the county clerk, Davis County Clerk McKenzie, he says, we don't have it. You got to get that from the Lieutenant Governor's office. So when I do a grammar request to the Lieutenant Governor's office, they say, well, we don't have them. You got to get those from the state auditor. They're the ones that looked at them. So I do a grammar request to state auditor, and they say, we don't have them. You got to get them from the Lieutenant Governor's office. So I end up having to file an appeal on everybody and the State Records Committee did schedule it. And I think I covered that in update number 12 and pretty extensively, and show how these grammar requests that it's like a circular firing squad of government officials all denying that these spare signatures even exist. And so then what ends up happening is what you just said is I thought, oh, you know what? I can do a grammar request then for the cover sheets. If you're telling me you don't have a list, and the reason the Lieutenant Governor's office said they don't have a list is because, hold on a second, stop. I got this, my neighbor's German Shepherd here, and he's licking himself and scratching me, stop. And so he's going to the other room. Right. So they, they say, well, we don't have a list because they were never entered into the VISTA system. And it's like, what the hell? How come they weren't entered into the VISTA system? How do you even know they're valid? Because the VISTA system, in fact, there's a video, I just posted it on X that's pretty interesting, that Robert Gerke from the Tribune goes and sees Davis County clerk, which I thought was funny. And Gerke kind of banters with me about it, just saying, I thought you would say something, because I'm kind of mocking the fact you went to Brian McKenzie to get a tour of and to get an explanation on how verification happens, but it's fine because, we get a pretty good insight, and you see the clerk right there. Her name is Lori. I think she's the manager of all the clerks there. And you see the verification process. She has to visually look at the signature and then compare it to the one that she sees in the VISTA system on her computer screen. And then you just click, you mark it if it's valid or not valid. So in this case, they're claiming they never even documented it in the VISTA system. So that's why there was no list. So when we met, Rick Cantrell set up a meeting with me, and I took a couple of people, or probably 3 people from Davis County that are involved in the Republican Party there went with me. And the auditor who did it said no, that it was documented on the packets themselves, that's where the check mark, if it was valid or not. So anyways, one thing leads to another. I ended up doing a grammar request for the cover sheets of Cox's spare signatures and the verification sheet. I don't get the whole packet. I just get the cover sheet that says how many were turned in. And I end up finding out he only had like 320 spare signatures total.
What?
Whether they were valid or not still remains to be seen. And so how does the state auditor tell us he had 391 valid ones? And so today I have no explanation as to why Ryan Calley, who is the state elections director, sends an email to Natalie Clausen on June 19th saying there's 592 spare signatures. That's not true. And then you have the legislative auditor saying, well, no, there's 492 spare signatures. That's not true. And then you have the state auditor saying, well, there's 391 that are verified as valid signatures of the spares, and that's not true either. because based on the public records that the lieutenant governor has provided me today, there's only 320 total signatures. Whether they're valid or not remains to be seen.
Wow. Okay, so really, when you put this all together, Governor Cox did not have the number of signatures he needed, and this is shown through those audits. He also did not have enough spare signatures to cover the shortfall. And I think the third point that they made was if they would have found that he didn't have enough signatures at the time and told him, he could have gone and collected more signatures before the deadline, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But why didn't he? They knew he was short. Everybody, all the people involved in this knew he was short, and they didn't go collect more. One of my theories. I have two theories on that. Without you even asking me, what are my one is at the time the way So number one, I was never involved in the Lyman campaign, so I never paid attention to them. Other than I said as a state delegate, when I got elected as a state delegate by my neighbors, they knew they wanted me to vote for Phil Lyman, and I said I would, and so that's what I did. And Lyman didn't turn in signatures at the time, but when I go back and look at the social media and start putting it on my timeline, Lyman did sign up to gather signatures, and indeed I could find posts where he was gathering signatures. Now, I don't know if he did that as a ploy to kind of fake out, Cox, because by the time we get to convention, I do know, I do know that probably March something, at the end of March is when Lyman says, I'm not collecting signatures. So what happens is, I think that Cox's people were desperate to get signatures and beat Lyman and turn them in. But I also think that they were having a problem gathering signatures. The people just were not signing for Cox, and it was very difficult to get the signatures because I like this thing you have up right now, that the clerks are analyzing 320,000 referendum signatures. That's double what you needed. And so guess what? It is possible to get the signatures you need. And if you're prudent, you're going to get double the signatures that you need. By the way, look at Walton campaign. Senator Walton, he's ran for Senate. He turns in over 50,000 signatures, and he only needed 28,000 also. And the same thing with Brown and these other guys that had other companies. They turn in well over the threshold what they needed. But here you have Cox, who they knew he was short. And by the way, these flag packets, I have evidence, and I talk about it in update number 13. Those flag packets that they remove, the Davis County clerk removes and sends back to the lieutenant governor, they end up realizing that Cox is short. Somebody made the decision, let's send these flag packets back to the Davis County clerk so they can use the signatures in them so Cox can meet the threshold. And clearly, we know from 2 audits, they actually use fraudulent signatures, to help him meet the threshold. So that's what I think they're hiding. I'm still in the process. I think I got like 4 or 5 grammar requests out and on appeal, and I'm going to find out eventually, because I don't have a timeline. I don't have, I just keep looking, I think these guys in the beginning thought, well, if we can just make it through the primary, people will forget. If we make it to the election in November, people aren't going to care anymore. And part of my motivation is just the Lyman supporters. I'm a Lyman supporter, a latecomer, but only because he got cheated. And I don't agree with a lot of things that Lyman talks about politically, but those take a back seat for me right now. And because I don't want to be part of the system that we get people in office by selection instead of election.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. You know, overall, my takeaway from this is you've really shown us the power of making grandma requests and all the information that you can get if you're persistent with
Right.
it. I guess, what kind of tips do you have for other people that want to start maybe getting involved and following your path?
Well, I think number one, you got to be selective about where you're going to put your time. And I mean, when I was on the school board, I could invest a lot of time on showing corruption and turning it over to the district attorney, only to get a letter saying, "Yeah, you're right." Like stuff like people would retire from the school district and set up a company, and then we're paying them over $100,000 a year to do evaluations of a curriculum. But then, as a school board member, nobody could show me the evaluations or the curriculum that we just paid for. And then I find out the board never even voted on that. You guys are just cheating us, everybody. So I could collect all that evidence and spend an inordinate amount of time on it, turn it over to the district attorney, only to get a letter from them saying, "You're right, that is illegal. It doesn't follow the procurement process, but we don't believe that we'll prevail in trial, so we're not moving forward with this." So after that happening
Oh,
about three
wow.
or four times, it's like, you know what? I'm not wasting my time gathering information if nobody's going to do anything with it. If they don't, if the power, because I don't have the power to do anything beyond that. Same thing here. I mean, there's a number of things I know are corrupt and wrong in city government and state government, but I'm not going to invest my time in it if it's not going to go anywhere. In this case, what motivated me was Lyman's people. Like for example, Greg Hughes. I think he was cheated out of an election. The way Malloy got on the ballot and stuff. In fact, I was on the executive committee for the Salt Lake County Republican Party, and I resigned because of that. Because I felt that our party chair on the local level, on the state level, didn't do anything. But the reason I bring that up is look at what Greg Hughes did, and I like Greg Hughes. I know him. We've worked together over the years. I worked with him closely when I was on the school board 10 years ago, and I have a lot of respect for him. But he didn't he didn't fight it. He was I think everybody just looked at it as a loyalist, that he is going to be true to loyal to the order of the way things are. That if the powers that be aren't going to question that election and let it happen, and it goes back to the incompetent lieutenant governor and her people, then Greg Hughes wasn't going to pursue it, and that's fine. That was his choice. In this case, I think if we look at history, Phil Lyman is unique, and the fact that he lost the election, but here we are a year later discussing it. And again, I don't consider myself I do know Lyman now, and I've talked to him. I have a lot of respect for him, and I I'm a state delegate. I'm going to vote for him as party chair. I don't regret voting for him last year for governor. And so anyways, here we are today, and my motivation, and I've had to sacrifice a lot of things in order to keep up with this, and put other things aside, because I'm not getting paid for this. And so my motivation is just his fans or followers, whatever people want to call them, and stuff. And I'm one of them now, and stuff. And I'm glad that I was had some motivation to see this through and stick with it, because there's still more to be revealed.
Yeah. Okay. So where should people follow you to get updates as they come?
I think X is the best place, and I think on X in my profile I have a link to my YouTube videos. And over the last year since I've done this, I really don't comment on anything else politically but this. And because I don't want to lose credibility, there's a number of other things that I'm passionate about, politically speaking, but I've kind of put those aside to just maintain, my credibility with people on this signature verification issue.
Okay, let me see if I can pull. I was just going to pull up your X for people. It's Dominguez.
Don
right?
Miguel.
Don't
Yeah,
we
you
get
had
it?
it up earlier, I think. You know, and
Yeah, that's how I was going to pull it back up for it. Don Miguel. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Let's see if it'll pop up. My computer. I have a running joke on my show about my computer and how it sucks.
I know you got it.
I won't.
It's showing.
I want to subject. There you go. Okay, folks. Yes, if you want to follow him, it is a good follow. He does great updates. Yeah, thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can have you back again for more updates as they come.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is the first time I've done this, and it was kind of exciting. The other thing I just want to say, I struggle with being able to disseminate all the information I have, and a lot of times I make a video and say that doesn't even make sense. It's not, people aren't going to get it and stuff. But again, I think this is a issue that you have to be really interested in. And my hat's off to Phil Lyman and Natalie Clausen for motivating people, to stay interested in this. And one last thing I do want to say, there were a number of laws that were passed this last session that resulted that are going to result in a better process, and the less likelihood of cheating is the way they did is going to, they're not going to be able to do it as well because of some laws that were passed. So that's a positive thing of this, that people shouldn't get frustrated because some of the stuff I'm uncovering may not go anywhere, or it will eventually. But nevertheless, we have laws in place now that it's going to be more difficult to cheat the way they did last year. All right, thanks.
Well, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. Okay, bye. Let's see. Wow, that was a. Well, I hope people enjoyed that. I will say to everybody, you should go and you should follow him on X. He really does put out great content. And this is, as you can see, he is doing a deep dive into this issue and doing it by using our grandma process. I mean, it's really impressive to see it. And really, even with what I had met him in person a few months ago before the indictments were announced, and he was actually able to pinpoint which signature gatherers were likely to be charged with crimes. I mean, that's how deep he has dove into this issue. Anyway, we'll try to have him back because that was a fascinating conversation. I learned things that I did not know before. Okay. If any, again, the phone lines are open. So if you want to call in, it's 385-899-2134. And let me see. Oh, so before Michael Clara came on, there is this topic I want to cover, and we'll see. Hopefully I can get to it next week. I'm going to have a few weeks here that are going to be a little bit crazy just because of, I litigate in my own, I should say this, I have my own practice. So, if you're looking for a lawyer, you could consider me. And, I've been practicing more than 20 years, graduated from Georgetown. I've worked at the Department of Justice and the Tax Division. I've litigated cases for over 20 years. So I have some cases I'm working on, and there's a lot of deadlines coming up. So I'm going to be very deep into drafting pleadings and stuff like that, which can actually be fun though. So I'm not saying it to say it, complain. It just means that it takes a lot of time. So it makes it a little bit harder when I'm trying to prep for the show. But what I want to try to talk about, and we'll do this maybe next week, is I think there's a double standard in Utah in terms of how we treat women who are credibly accused of sexual harassment versus men. And I'm finding this topic to be really fascinating because, with the whole Me Too movement, there has been this weaponization of part of what happened is they weaponized Me Too. And when they did that, I think they've used it to take out a lot of powerful men in prominent positions, or even just if someone they think is inconvenient to have around. Hold on, so I'm supposed to say, oh, just so everyone knows, you're listening to KMMU Mainstream Media. We're live streaming to X, Rumble, YouTube, and our website, kmmu.org. Oh, my lonely call screener is waiting for your call. So if you want to call in the last few minutes we have, please do. As you can see, my camera is going on and off. If you are watching this, this is because, again, I have a crappy computer. And, it's part of the running joke where I could have bought my computer, the computer that my employer had given me from them for like $180. But at the time, they had fired me and I did not want their computer. And even though I also knew in my head, I was like, I know I'm going to regret this decision, but you know what? I don't care. F you, and you can shove it where the sun don't shine. And every single time I do this show, I regret it. So I guess maybe that's a lesson. Hopefully at some point I'll go buy a new computer, but not going to happen yet. Now, okay. So what was I just saying though? Oh, so I want to talk about this because basically Amelia Powers Gardner, who is now an elected commissioner on the Utah County Commission, was accused of sexual harassment by one of her gay employees when she was the Utah County clerk. And there was an investigation done and they found that it was true. So and she did stuff like she threw keys at this guy, she threw her purse at him, she did horrible things. And then it's just crazy to me that after that report came out, voters elected her to be on the Utah County Commission. And I just think they should have not elected her, and she shouldn't be in any office at this point because, again, she's sexually harassed an employee. And I had seen some comments when I initially had I had done a weekly rundown piece about this, and someone said, "Oh, well, he's gay, he deserves it," or something like that. And I was like, "Oh, I guess. I mean, maybe that's your view of it. I don't think that's how workplaces actually operate, and I don't think people should be treated like that, like how she treated this guy." But then there's this other case where a bunch of women, prominent women in Utah, after the 2020 election, they accused Dave Robinson, who is like a gay conservative who was volunteering for the Salt Lake County Republican Party, of sexual harassment. In that case, I haven't seen a similar investigation, but those allegations destroyed his life. And so I think that difference in how we treat men and women is really interesting. And it's something that we probably need to look at and start to address, because everybody should be treated the same. So if you commit sexual harassment and you're a man, you should be treated the same as if you commit sexual harassment and you're a woman. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to yell at my little dog. Hold on. Okay, problem solved. Ricky was outside. Ricky's my little mutt, and she was outside barking. And I sometimes she's kind of crazy. She's the only female in the house, so she's a little crazy. Okay, and so that is where I think that's one of the issues. Hopefully, we'll talk about next week, and then we'll also get back to the decision by the court about the Utah Fits All scholarship program. And I think it's important that we discuss that some more, because regardless of whether you support it or not, and because I know there is a divide on the right about whether that program was a good idea or not, we still need to make sure that we understand the court's decision and how to move forward. Because, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was saying that, well, I don't think the law is constitutional because it's not open to everybody. Okay, that's fine. And the court actually, that's one of the things that it says, is that everybody needs to be able to access the scholarship. And so your fix would be, okay, let's just open it up and make it for everybody and make it universal. Candace Berrucci has actually said that the law itself is designed to become universal at some point. But like I said, the judge has put some other things in there that will make it so that even making it universal, I don't think will make it constitutional. And so we need to understand that better so that we as the grassroots can help the legislature respond to it better. Because we want to make sure that the decisions that courts are making are actually reflective of what the Constitution was intended to say when it was drafted. Okay. Okay. Well, I don't really have anything else today, so I think we are going to end 3 minutes early. This has been the Goud Crowd. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back next Monday from 5 to 7, and we hope to see you there.